Good afternoon. My name is Damien Skeet, and I'm the Vice President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, ICAB. This afternoon, we continue where our President Tracy Marshall left off last week. Why should we care about climate change, and what is our role as professional accountants? Last week, we shared with you what is Barbados's contribution to the global goal of keeping our temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. We shared that the plan included the lowering of our emissions by 35%. But what exactly are we lowering? Let us try to explain what emissions we are talking about. There are three types of emissions: direct emissions, indirect emissions, and emissions that are acquired through the products and services you purchase from other sources. Direct emissions come from a company or an individual's operations. For example, if you own a truck that delivers products to customers, then there are emissions from your truck as it burns fuel to transport your products. Or, if you run a manufacturing plant, there may be gases released into the atmosphere as a byproduct of your production process. These direct emissions are also called Scope 1 emissions. Indirect emissions, or Scope 2 emissions, come from the use of purchased energy. As an example, the electricity purchased from our local utility is considered a Scope 2 emission. And finally, we have Scope 3 emissions. These are indirect emissions that are attributed to you because of the purchase of a service. Examples of Scope 3 emissions include business travel on airplanes or the travel of employees of companies to and from their place of work. Indirect emissions for one company's operations or another company's direct emissions. The key thing to remember about direct emissions or Scope 1 emissions is that a company has control over its Scope 1 emissions because of the choices it makes. However, with indirect emissions, there is less control. So now that we understand the different types of emissions, let us apply that understanding to what we shared last week about the government of Barbados's climate plan. The government is aiming for 95% of its electricity to be generated using renewable sources by 2030. If that is achieved, that action will have an impact on indirect emissions of Scope 2 emissions for every consumer of purchased energy. The Barbados Climate Plan also includes the upgrade of the government's fleet of vehicles from fuel to electric power or alternative fuels by 2030. That action would impact the direct emissions or Scope 1 emissions of government entities, and in turn, the indirect emissions or Scope 3 emissions for everyone who does business with government. ICAB will continue to provide the relevant continuing professional education to our members to ensure they can provide the required support to our companies and the public sector. It is our professional view as accountants that the identification and measurement of emissions is a very important step in meeting the Barbados climate change goals. And given the hot, still days and nights we are experiencing this summer, should we all not have a thought about the climate actions we will take to reduce our emissions? All organizations should include in their strategic plans what climate actions they will be adopting for the future. Today we explain the categories of emissions And in our next segment, we will explore how they are measured and touch on the new frameworks for reporting that are being considered for Barbados. My name is Damien Skeet, and this has been Talking Finance.